So I'm here with fellow Dungeons and Dragons Dungeon Master Ben Bingham. So I am here to interview about what roleplay is to you. So what really got you into roleplay?
That's actually a kind of hard question to answer because I've been doing it for a pretty long time. I guess the earliest version of it that I did was when I would play with Legos in my basement, and we set up like a whole world, and each of us had our own little character that we made out of the Lego bricks, and we had like this whole world that had an economy. There were like bad guys that would show up and attack, and I was the president. And I guess that's like the earliest version of it, because like I made up the rules of like this Lego world that my friends and my sister and sometimes my parents had in the basement. It was in the basement, so like we had the whole basement just filled with Legos. But in terms of like role-playing games, it started with like, I guess, RuneScape.
How has that evolved into what you do now? Because I know that you are an extremely busy man when it comes to the world of roleplaying.
Yeah, well, over the course of like middle school and high school, I made my own system, which I really liked doing, and I always kind of wanted to get into D&D, but I didn't have the books and stuff. But much more recently, I have gotten more into D&D. It's the first time I actually got to like DM was over the summer when I was working at a summer camp, and I ran a program where we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I DM'd for a group of 13 to 17 year olds who had never played before, and it was a lot of fun. And so coming into this year of school, I decided I was going to try to like really make it work, because I realized I could DM. The reason I never played before is because no one wanted to DM, and so I'm like, I can DM this. And then I was like, hey guys, we should play D&D, and then people wanted to play, and so that's what happened.
And how would you have that equate to fandom, or how would you equate that to just your everyday interactions with other fan-centric people?
I think a lot of fandom is built around like having the rules of this world, but like playing around with them and changing them sometimes into ways that you like. And I think D&D is one of the only properties or whatever that actually like encourages that. They say like, this is the base world, you can change it however you want, and it can be whatever you want it to be. And I think that's pretty cool. And I guess that definitely relates to, fandom, because it's a really big part of fandom is like making your own versions of a story, and D&D actually like tells you to do that.
Now, has there any been like actual major properties or major like films that you've really incorporated within your own world?
Within my D&D world, I mostly just use stuff from. I don't like the idea of taking stuff from other properties and putting it in my D&D world, but I did experiment with that with the other system I made, in which anyone could. I forget what the rules were, but there were little quests that existed outside of the game. One of them was like a bathroom wall that gave you a plunger in the game. But there are other ones that like they basically. I think one of them was like watched like 200 hours of one show or something, and the reward was like you got an ability based on something from the show. So like they really took advantage of the fact that there weren't too many people playing, so I could, make really, basically the game like pulled stuff from so many different things, but I eventually moved away from that because it just didn't feel too original to me. I preferred to just like have it all be from the game that we were playing.
Have you really ever played as a player within role-playing at all, any form of role-playing?
Yeah. I've played, I've definitely DM'd more than I've played, but like, like tabletop role-playing or
just any form.
Yeah, I mean, I got really into RuneScape when I was a kid. I did get very good at it. I never got very far in it, but I just liked running around with my bronze scimitar and attacking highwaymen. But I did play. I played a decent amount of I don't know. I guess I've never really I've never played that much role playing besides like tabletop role playing games. Like I've played a decent amount of D&D and other games.
How would you say the difference between like DMing and just playing as a character would be for you?
Well, when I just play as a character, I often have to push myself away from the DMing roles. Like my backstory is always stupidly intricate. It can be annoying to DMs, I think, because Artie's nodding. He's DM'd me before. My backstory is a little bit too comprehensive sometimes.
Oh no, I relate to that. I think that's really any problem that any DM or any really big storyteller really gets into, because when you're just a character in D&D, you're just like, okay, I have a small backstory, but my story lies ahead of me.
Yeah, and that's something that... Well, I mean, my character for this thing was starting at level 3, so it made sense to have a little bit of a backstory.
Oh yeah, I feel like starting at level 3.
If I was starting at level 1, I would have been like, I am a small town baker, and I've never picked up a sword in my life, but I'm ready for an adventure. But I don't know. I think I like DMing better because I feel like just meeting and just like when you're playing, you're not DMing. There's not that much you can do outside of playing. Like you meet and you just play, and you play for probably 2 hours a week, and then you just wait until the next time. But I really enjoy like the world building and everything, and like basically the whole thing. And so I like being able to have stuff I can work on in between sessions, which a player doesn't really get to do as much. Of course, sometimes I don't have time to do that, and I have been DMing 3 parties this semester. I'm trying to maybe cut that down to 2, but like make them a little bit better. I don't know. I think they're pretty... I think playing isn't all that different from DMing. But I think I prefer to DM.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'm sure we will talk about this not in an academic format another time, because that's tend to what we talk about. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Such as before, I have another DM with me. This is a phenomenal person who just turned 20. Go you. Artie Street. So tell me about your role-playing experience.
Well, for me personally, I think for me it definitely started with playing pretend at recess. That was sort of my origin story. Vampires and werewolves and superheroes on the playground and in the sandbox. As a kid, I was big into fantasy and science fiction. So Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. So I had plenty of opportunities to get props from the Eden of nerddom, Toys R Us. So I had my lightsabers and my foam and plastic swords, and plenty of friends who, majority of them were boys. So, being violent in the backyard with play weapons was, a no-brainer.
It's really entertaining for me, because when you think about like little kids just playing in their backyard and acting like that, it's really LARPing. And when like LARPing now has such like a nerdy connotation, which it should, but like when you think about all these other forms like academic role play, that is really LARPing. It's a subsection, because you're in the situation where you need to pretend, oh, I'm in this critical role where I
We'll get to that in a minute.
I'm in this critical role where I have to decide whether this child has to do this or has to do something else. Like, I'm an education minor, and we have to talk about this all the time, and we're in these situations where we have to make an informed decision. But it's really interesting that really LARPing's a huge part of life with it. You don't even realize it. So there's different types of role play. Can you go into that? Because I know that.
Definitely looking back on that, it's funny to look at it as, oh yeah, I used to LARP, because now it's just a bunch of adults in costumes, playing characters. It's a bit more codified. You have rules and things like that. But for me, being 8, 9, 10 years old, it's very simple. We're outside and we're horseplay. So thinking back on it, yeah, that would be my first time role playing. And the fact that this is back in elementary school, I had known these people for years. So there was this fair bit of continuity with our various characters and ideas, and the sort of the scaling of craziness over the course of 6 some odd years. So that idea, that state of being, would definitely carry into my my video game experiences. So playing multiplayer RPGs like Club Penguin or Club Penguin, or it's funny thinking about it as a multiplayer role-playing game.
Well, it really is.
It is. So being a spy, or being a surfer, or running the coffee shop. Little things like that really gave me a sense of how to make a character, how to build a character, how to be a part of the world using the elements that are already there. How can you sort of make a story for yourself? And all the elements are there. All you have to do is wield them. So in games like City of Heroes, which is very, 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 very old game, or even actually no, I did play RuneScape for a time. So these particular genre watersheds really put me in a space where I could be a part of very interesting worlds that I was already interested in, and craft my own stories from them. There was this great game that I played for a little bit of my beginning years as a high school student, was Star Trek Online. Now, I loved Star Trek growing up. My dad loved it. It was because of my dad. That's why I love it so much. So the game was the perfect way for me to take my love of the game and engage in fandom that way. Everyone playing the game was in some way, shape, or form a fan. You get to captain your own ship. You get to fight all the different villains of the Star Trek mythos, and being able to participate in that giant story was a cool way of engaging in Star Trek fandom and indulging my own little slice of the pie.
So, there are many different forms of online role-playing, and you've talked about that. And I can't help but think of my own experience where I have been kind of shoved into DMing on different forums, like on Roll20 or other terrible websites. Roll20 is good, but not as good as actually playing in person. And there's always that stress that they can't actually physically communicate. And with that, where you can sometimes get different tones of voices, would you say that online role-playing is more challenging than something like Dungeons and Dragons?
I would say that first we're talking about online role playing. It comes in a few different forms. You have the text based sort of role playing where you're in a forum space and you're either playing in a set world determined by the owners of the forum, or you're sort of doing this little bit of more of an ad hoc sort of a thing. But I've done that for quite a bit. I do it, and I still do it today. I have a friend who lives all the way in South Carolina, but we have a group of friends, and we meet online, and we participate in a world that he has devised. So we all created characters, or some of us create what you have is this concept of and this again traces back to fandom, of a multiverse idea. So the forum is set in this sort of in between space where all of the different canons from different pieces of literature, video game, anime, stuff like that can cross. So any kind of character can be present in the space. Anyone can play anyone. So you have original characters devised. So I play several. But I also have played canon characters from other universes in this online space.
Can you go more into why you do more canon characters instead of sometimes just playing your own?
Oh no, I definitely have more original characters than I do canon characters. And I like playing more original characters because it allows me more control over my story. It allows me to build it from the ground up, whereas a canon character has a set backstory, has a set relationship with other things. And so when it comes to these sort of hodgepodge, melting pot role play spaces, can be difficult to engage in the ongoing meta plot as a character that's coming from someplace else. An original character can originate in that meta plot, so it's a bit more cohesive, and I enjoy that quite a bit because my original characters interact with other people's original characters, and that allows us to build narratives and original relationships, building off of our own respective writing skills and our own personal goals for the characters that we create. And it allows for really, really awesome, jam-packed, action-y stories, or whatever kind of story that we want to tell.
That's really interesting. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd really like to cover? Because I know that you are a god when it comes to this. Well, we all are gods because we all are DMs, really. And
for me personally, contrary to some of the other people that I know, I definitely play more than I take on the role as a game master or a dungeon master or a storyteller. Personally, because I'm in my own head a lot when it comes to narrative and storytelling. I'm constantly sort of in my own writer's room, to the point where I don't really have a lot of time to do so, to actually put something together. When I try to prepare for any sort of game mastering activity, I have to think of, okay, what sort of setup am I going to run with? So there's a lot of pre-production, for me anyway, that goes into that. I know some other people don't do so much pre-game prep before they go in. Some people do it off the cuff, and that works for some people. Sometimes that works for me, but I often like to have a little bit of stuff planned out before I start. Another thing is being a player for me is easier. It gives me more opportunities to just jump in feet first into a role-playing experience. I'm one of Ben's players. I play with him often. And I quite like that because it's easily accessible. It's easily there. There's a story that I can play in, and allows me to, use another form of creative expression through creating characters that can engage in a world. While I very much take a lot of joy in creating my own worlds and my own ideas for stories and narrative elements, I take great joy in also being able to reduce that just a little bit to participate in someone else's. That's a lot of fun too.
Well, thank you so much. As I said with Ben, I'm sure we will be talking about this, and maybe one day we'll actually record a lot of people playing, and maybe I can post that on the site too.
Oh, I forgot. We forgot to talk about fandom.
Oh yes, talk about that too.
So the thing about fandom, and particularly since we've gone on to sort of tabletop role playing games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, or anything published by White Wolf with a World of Darkness, the fandom really sort of presents itself and it manifests through the lens of what's called actual play. I think we can abbreviate it for AP for the sake of the interview. So with actual plays, it's people recording their sessions, whether it's through a podcast format or through live video. People are recording their play sessions during these games. So a big example of this is Geek and Sundry and their show Critical Role, hosted by Matthew Mercer and his voice acting friends. And they've been doing this for years. And I think a big part of the fandom is, well, one, because the players are all actors in some way, shape, or form. They're all dramatists. They're all performers of some degree. Their focus on character and relationship and engaging with their narrative takes center stage. And so what they have is a very unique form of play that's very different from, say, you and me at the table, in terms of focus and attention. Whereas, you or I may focus more on stats and player abilities, and party composition. Oh, do we have a healer? Do we have someone that can that's very good at talking, stuff like that. For them, for Critical Role, their focus is very much on what would my character do in this situation. So they do these accents, they do these the varying forms of expression to really immerse you, the viewer, into the world that Matt Mercer has created. And the fandom very much interacts with these actual plays. Relatable stories, right? I'm watching this game, and it's going to inspire me to run my game similarly.
Yeah, I remember in my first really experience playing Dungeons and Dragons, my DM incorporated one of 3 characters that Matt Mercer created. I cannot remember which ones because this was 3 years ago, but I just remember me just never really knowing what everything was, and then I just started playing everything, and I just started interacting with other people within the D&D community, and I was just like, wow, there's thousands, hundreds of many people that are actually within this massive role-playing community that I never really got into when I was more into online roleplay, because now I could actually visually see people playing the game and actually play with others in person, and it really helped my social life.
I think the biggest part of fandom is, when it comes to role-playing in general, is that community, is that marketplace of ideas. You have this concept called homebrew, right, where people change the rules around, where people come up with interesting riffs on other pre-extant concepts and twist them ever so slightly to generate different results. So different kinds of character builds, different kinds of enemies that your party can face, changing statistics around, changing figures around, coming up with original ideas that may not exist quite yet in published material. And that extends to any form of role-playing, really. You putting your own spin on some things. Homebrew, I think, is a very interactive side of the fandom, because everyone's going to come up with something different. Everyone's going to come up with their own take on something. And when you do that, you really sort of capture what Gary Gygax, the founder of D&D, really wanted.
Can you name the other guy who founded D&D?
Besides Ed Greenwood?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy.
Almost no one knows his name.
I know.
Because it's not as cool as Gary Gygax.
It's really sad, because Ed Greenwood was responsible for writing a lot of the lore of the...
His last name wasn't Gygax.
No, it wasn't.
His name did not have alliteration.
No, it did not. So yeah, really capturing what Gygax had in store was, oh hey, I'm having a problem interpreting this rule. What should I do? Whatever you want.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of really taking charge of the story that you want to tell, I think, is a core part of role playing and the fandoms that it creates.
Well, thank you so much, and once again, we should talk about this more.
Absolutely.